Mystery and Deceit, From Earth to Mars, Book 1 of Chaos's Orbit Saga, written by James T. Hall, narrated by Chris Pullman. Episode 3, Thermopylae, Part 1. Shells were whizzing past, mortars advancing toward us. We hadn't expected an attack from behind. They must have found the old path through the hills. Tim Mayflower and I had hastily arranged a skirmish line, but even so, if we couldn't stem the tide of the rear flank, the base would be lost. "Can we get any reinforcements, Eric?" Tim asked over the comm. He held command of our left. "No, they're still attacking in force at our front. These must be the reserves." Every last one of them, I thought. This had to be a desperation move. After 4 days, we hadn't given any ground. Wave after wave had been sent at us and had been repelled each time. The insurgent commander knew he had to push all in, do something drastic if he wanted to win this critical battle. And this was it. "It's just us." "Christ, these mortars are getting close!" With only Tim and I having the protection of the nanites, this battle came down to strategy, one pseudo-conventional force against another. To outflank the flanking maneuver was our only hope. "Sir, more troops coming onto the field!" I looked and saw where they exited the deep forest, the old through path, over by Tim. "Tim, we're becoming outnumbered on a level battlefield. We need to gain a tactical advantage. Anything on your end?" A few seconds of silence, then, suddenly, a mortar flew overhead from behind me. Good, I thought. We finally have a little artillery of our own. "Sir, there's a small hill off to my left, about 30 yards. If I could get an HMG up there, it'd give us some room to push on the right. Open up a hole in the line over there." I rolled it over in my mind. We would have to draw attention to our right, so the leftward maneuver would work. We'd also need to get troops ready to execute a quick shift and advance on the left. It was risky. The balance of forces was now tipping in favor of chaos. "Sir, I think that position would have a direct line of fire up the old path," Tim said. But that was the advantage we needed. "We're doing it. Get a squad together. I'm going to start massing troops right to make it look like we'll push from there. It, along with some concentrated mortar fire, should draw their attention that way. With some luck, if they do see your squad, they'll think it's the feint." "Really sell it, sir," Tim said as he readied his advanced squad. I began a slow and purposeful sidling right. I kept crouched just low enough to keep out of the bulk of the fire, but just high enough to be seen. We wouldn't attack without an nanitic leading, and their commander would know that. As I went, I grabbed every third trooper, sending them to the right. At the same time, I passed along an order to their platoon leaders. "We're feinting right and are going to push left. My end of the line will push down and fill in as the line surges left and advances through the hole there. Stand ready." My platoon leaders knew they could trust me. Not once while in battle had I failed them, a streak I hoped to keep alive that day. Once I had enough troops on the right, I decided on one final feint. "Jill, 4 more mortars and then hold off," I said over the comm. "Roger, 4 more than hold," came the crisp reply. "John, over here," I said, calling first platoon's officer to me. "Get your best NCOs on this. 2 squads of what we have down here, intersperse them. When I call for it, they need to act confused, getting ready to advance and looking like they're going, but holding back, like orders weren't communicated properly, and they need to sell it." To what end? John was a good officer. He didn't want to unnecessarily risk his troops. To him I said, "I want to draw some of their forces forward here on our right, catch them in the crossfire and mortar fire, then Tim will have at their flank and blow the hole that we need to stop this." "Yes, sir," John said as he went back to his line, passing the word. "Tim, you ready down there?" I asked over the comm. "Almost, sir. Just about set up." In reply, "Hold off firing until the mortars start falling again over here. Then we'll surge your way." "Sounds like a plan," Tim said. "I have a straight line down the path." He'd gone with his squad. He should have stayed back. I had to put that out of my mind for the moment. "John," I called. "Ready," he yelled with a thumbs up. "Now!" John yelled orders, and on cue, about a third of the men online fumbled around. Some ran into each other and dropped weapons. Others looked in a questioning haze. I kept my gaze downrange. Almost on cue, the insurgent commander saw the confusion and broke his left into an advance. Covering fire dropped on us from his extreme left and center. John's men fell flat. "Hold fire!" I yelled. "Let them get closer!" They kept up the advance, heavy machine gun fire streaking by overhead. Closer! Shots began to fly closer to me now. It was hard to hide a man standing like a tree in a clearing. Closer! Sir! John shouted, worry edging his voice. It was time. Jill! 5 rounds AG quick! Fire for effect! In reply, over the comm, 5 rounds AG quick, Roger. Open fire, I said. Rifles and machine guns lit up our right flank. I targeted their HMG covering fire. The advance stalled. Thump, 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 thump. Mortars in the air. What must have been an insurgent officer tried to get up in order to retreat, but was thrown back by a burst to his chest. The mortar struck. One where the officer had just died. Another to his back right. To his left. Jill, I said over the comm. Walk rounds back for 30 yards on that pattern. Walking for 30, aye. John, I cried. Shift! The final 2 mortar rounds struck as we surged left. Tim, now, I said, over the comm. From a hill some 30 yards beyond the left edge of our line, 2 HMGs opened up. John, keep your MGs on them. I ran down the line, watching as men hopped up and ran with me, 2 replaced by 1. This was the moment where the entire battle was to be decided. We reached the left end of the line and turned, not even a hesitation in the movement of these troopers. Tim's round zinged overhead as John's HMGs sounded off on the right. Rounds complete. They need us back at the front, sir, Jill said over the comm. Go, Jill. We're too close for you now anyway. Thanks for the assist. Always willing to do what little I can for the rear echelon, she said with a quip. We were there. I saw the commander of the insurgent group. He was frantically yelling orders left and right, wildly gesticulating, all the while stealing glances over his shoulder down the path where his reinforcements were pinned. This was it. I jumped over the line, my troopers 10 yards behind me, firing as they approached. I flashed out my collapsible batons. The least harm shot through my mind. It had been James's order in the treatment of the enemy. My plasma rifle or sword would have worked, but the batons would be as effectively at taking out enemy troops out of the fight. I tore through their line, making a beeline for their commander. He saw me. His arm extended toward me and a blackened glint shone off his exposed arm. He was one of Chaos's field commanders, a dark nanitic elite. The attack at the front had become the distraction. This was their main assault. A field commander of a force this size wouldn't be directing a flanking maneuver. Ah! I cried, a renewed sense of urgency in me. If I could take down the dark nanitic, the battle would be won. I saw in him, as he saw in me, the marks of a high leader. I dropped my batons, willing plasma shoots out of the top of my hands. This would drain my energy, but necessarily. The first purple plasma orb streaked out of my hand, striking and throwing back what must have been another of the dark nanitic's officers. In that moment, I knew my troopers would understand how the battle had changed. I was now grateful Tim had pushed left. I might need him to finish this. Shots spat forth from my right hand, striking an insurgent trooper on line, turning toward me. I realized then that time had slowed as the trooper's look of surprise lasted and lasted, his body taking longer than it should to fall backward. I floated mid-leap. Plasma shots spat out and sped away at normal speed, one after another. Gunfire, though, seemed as a punch through water. I felt Tim's approach. He leapt from cover when he saw the first plasma bolt. For him to be advancing in such a way, he had to reveal the position of his HMGs, but hiding was no longer a necessity. John's men. I could feel them pushing to advance. We'd caught a great number of the Dark Nanitic's troopers in our feint within a feint. The Dark Nanitic was still trying to order troops to action, 30 yards away now. My foot finally met earth. 2 shots toward left, as troops went flying backward, 3 spaced right toward the secondary line. Yellow bolts flashed toward the same area from behind me. Tim was opening a hole for John's men. For a micro-instant, I passed my awareness behind me and felt my troopers shooting those in their path, advancing onward. It was a different fight. They knew that now, too. A Dark Nanitic meant well-trained troops. Our feint had caught them unawares. These were no reserve forces, and could not be expected to give up even after loss of limb. The only way to stop them was to kill them. Purple bolts left, right, yellow, right down the line. My other foot met earth. 27 yards. The man's hand clenched to a fist from pointing. The Dark Nanitic had given up hope of command. Squared tubules formed across his fist. Plasma chambers. The battlefield darkened slightly. A black orb streaked toward me, missing by an inch as I dodged out of the way. 24 yards as my foot hit the ground. The start of a pain cry went up from behind me. The bolt had struck one of my troopers. They didn't kill outright, these dark bolts, but rather burned and slowly ate away at the body through the nervous system, cooking it by overheating. I turned my attention onto the nanitic. Purple bolts streaked toward him, black toward me, a strike against my left shoulder, putting me off balance. I stumbled as my foot found ground. 21 yards. I fell, rolled left. 4 more bolts of purple shot toward him as I found my footing again. He stood as they struck him center mass, driving him straight backwards, ruts formed by his feet. 18 yards away now. Yellow bolts streaked in and struck the man, driving back his left shoulder. Tim. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him taking my right. He was young and impetuous, feeling invincible. I would change after this exchange. Remember to roll with the energy, I whispered to myself subconsciously. If Tim didn't, he would face the full blow of the dark nanitic's bolts. It could kill him even through his nanitics. More purple bolts as I turned back, just in time to dodge 3 black bolts to my right. 15 yards. This man was holding nothing back, knowing that if he failed, chaos would kill him. Those bolts of his were beyond maximum safe yield. The man was draining all his energy into him. His left hand shot up, the tubules glowing there, as 3 black as space bolts shot toward Tim. These were the man's most powerful attacks yet. He was growing desperate the closer we came. Tim fell from my peripheral vision. 4 more purple bolts from me, hitting the man's center mass. He was driven back again and fell forward onto his hands. 12 yards separated us. Yellow bolts came in low, flopping the man straight up against a tree. Purple bolts for me, center mass again. The tree leant backward and creaked. Yellow bolts, center mass. An oaken groan pierced the battlefield, excruciatingly loud and slowed time. 9 yards. Purple bolts, center mass. Yellow ones from a higher angle, center mass. The last did not flash against the man. His nanites had failed him. 6 yards. I stopped dead in my tracks and let one final bolt strike out. It struck true. The man's eyes hallowed. His shoulders flew inward as his chest collapsed. His feet lifted off the ground, and the great oak holding him up cracked backwards. As its trunk broke in two, one final yellow bolt streaked in toward the man as he was yet semi-floating, a purple glow emanating from a pit in his chest. He was thrown back, and suddenly through his chest came part of the dead tree's top. The bull had skewered him on the oak. I lowered my arms, and time flowed back in on me. Cries of pain and agony came from behind me. The smell of blood was all around. I spun around and caught a man's bayonet thrust, wrenching the rifle from him even as his momentum carried him past me. I smashed his head with the butt of his own weapon. I broke the weapon at its action and dropped it. Tim's HMG nest kept firing. John's men had made it to the secondary line. The men following me were still 15 yards back. "Center forward!" I yelled and signaled. "Tim!" "Sir!" came the breathless reply, approaching from his last position to my right. Looking at him, I said, "You okay?" "I'll live, Eric," he replied. "My hands tingle a bit more than I'd expect." So did mine. The dark bolt, they ate at nerves. Our nanites blunted it, but some energy still flows to the extremities. Once this is over, have some nerve regen done. Looking back along the old path, I ordered, "Get our troops from the middle, pushing up that path along with mine. John's platoon will clean up here." Like a physical blow, awareness struck me. The dark nanitic was still alive. Tim's face betrayed the same awareness. "Right. Get to it. We have to push their flank now. We've broken their main attack and need to capitalize on it. I'll see to their commander." I turned and strode away from Tim, heading toward the dark nanitic. He lives to give me a message, I knew. As I approached the man, a raspy voice said, "Eric Pullman. Being bested by you makes it worthwhile." The man coughed up blood. That he could still breathe astounded me. "As it should," the man said. "A mind reader." "That's right, Eric. Your defenses are down just enough right now." I hastily put up the mental blocks Melinda had helped me perfect. The fact that my plan had succeeded in turning this commander's flank meant that he hadn't had the insight during the attack, only now afterward, and now no longer. "What is your name?" I asked. "Matthew Welsh. Servant of Chaos," came the proud reply. Chaos is commander of commanders, his first and most senior black band leader, laid skewered on the oak tree before me. I stopped a pace from him, his legs resting awkwardly on the jagged lower stump of the destroyed oak. "I know this was your main attack. Call off the rest, and your forces will be granted leniency." "You know I can't do that, Eric. You and others of Atmo intercepted our message. We're in it to the hilt. Win or lose. You know what you face here, Eric. The man coughed again, blood with bubbles. You'll have to kill us all to end this siege. You know that. He spoke the truth, of course. Do you have any other messages? I asked, both hoping to find a way out of the slaughter before me, and out of pity for the dying man. Yes. One directly from Chaos at this point. You will win here. You'll never win the war. But it will cost you and yours dearly. More coughing. The man's head lolled to one side. His eyes began to glaze over. His pupils dilated independently. Then his voice changed subtly. In the end, though, you cannot stop us. I will be seeing you soon, Eric. The man's head dropped back entirely, his whole body going limp. Chaos had channeled directly through this man, and might yet be doing so. I withdrew my sword, sidestepped the tree so I was lined up beside the body, and in one motion took its head. When I had the chance to withdraw my nanites from battle mode, my conscience would pay dearly for what I had just done, as well as I was about to do. John, I called. Gas this, I said as I pointed at the headless body. Make sure it burns completely. We need no spying eyes. Till the body was fully gone, Chaos could still extend his senses through it. Only when even the nanites were gone could we consider ourselves safe from his prying eyes. And be sure not to touch it, lest you find yourself becoming this man. I'd seen it before. A careless man coming into contact with a dead, dark nanitic, finding himself infected with the person's nanites, trying to re-establish their dead host. I turned to look after Tim's advance. It was progressing well. The HMG nest he had set up was now disassembled and moving forward. Katie, I said over the general comm. Yes, Eric, came the reply. I locked into her channel. How's it going up front? We've been worse off, sir. Still can't pin down their location out there. After a few shots, their troops move. Seems like inbound already is picking up a bit. I'd expect that, I replied. We stopped their flanking maneuver and are pushing back toward the front. Ours actually turned out to be the main offensive. I heard the hesitation in Katie's voice as she said, Are you sure? It hasn't exactly let up since you went down there. We killed a dark servant, I said. Silence. A dark nanitic, she replied. The first of Chaos's hand-picked. The body's being burned now. Holy shit, she said. You guys okay? Acceptable losses, considering. Tim's pushing the advance. Watch for their lines to shift when he makes contact, then push in. We're going to finish this today. I felt heat as the body was set ablaze. Inaudible screams emanated from the wretched thing as nanites perished in the fire. Yes, sir, Katie finished over the comm. Mystery and Deceit from Earth to Mars. Book 1 of Chaos's Orbit Saga. Written by James T. Hall. Narrated by Chris Pullman. Episode 4, Thermopylae, Part 1. Visit us online at www.narclaninc.com to link up with us.